For 15 years, she arrived before sunrise at the headquarters of Chamberlain Company, the family-owned corporation her grandfather built from nothing but a rented garage, a stubborn dream. She started as an intern, worked her way up to managing vital operations, became the only link between the old values of hard work, the new demands of modern business. While others partied on yachts funded by company dividends, she spent nights reworking production plans, meeting suppliers, calming employees who still remembered her grandfather's handshake. She believed effort spoke louder than blood. She was wrong. Her uncle, now chairman of the board, never hid his discomfort around her. He found her dedication threatening, her competence inconvenient. Her success highlighted his own mediocrity. The other family members, her cousins, nieces, even her own mother, mirrored his attitude. They dismissed her ideas as idealistic, accused her of being too emotional, treated her presence like a stain on the corporate dynasty. She thought they were simply resistant to change. In truth, they were terrified she might one day surpass them. The warning signs were subtle at first. Meetings where she wasn't invited. Projects reassigned without her knowledge. Emails she sent that never received replies. She convinced herself it was temporary, part of an adjustment period as the new fiscal year began. She had always been the one who solved crises, not the one who became one. But something darker simmered beneath the silence. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Eyes slid away as if she carried a contagious truth. The walls whispered conspiracy long before she could hear it. The final blow came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. She parked in her usual spot, greeted the front desk staff, took the elevator to her floor. Before the doors opened, 2 security guards stepped in. Their presence was cold, mechanical, without explanation. She tried to step out, but they blocked her path. One of them pressed the emergency stop button. The other announced the words that froze her breath. "You are no longer authorized to enter this building." Her badge was deactivated. Her access card blinked red. Her name, once displayed proudly on her office door, had already been removed. It was as if she had never existed. They escorted her through hallways she helped design, past colleagues who refused to make eye contact, straight into the boardroom, where her family sat waiting like judges at a private execution. Her uncle leaned back in his leather chair, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He gestured toward her empty chair, a cruel reminder of her displacement. Without reviewing her contributions, without presenting evidence of misconduct, the board declared she lacked the mindset for leadership. They said she was too principled, too serious, not adaptable enough for the future. The words were dressed in corporate language, but the message was primitive. She didn't belong. Her mother, seated among the board members, did not defend her. Instead, she nodded along, as if loyalty were a burden. The betrayal struck harder than any termination notice ever could. The room felt colder than the marble floor beneath her feet. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. They watched her fall apart with clinical detachment, as if her pain were merely background noise. Security dragged her outside, ignoring her trembling legs. In the parking lot, surrounded by the empire she once protected, she collapsed. Her family stood at the balcony above, laughing not with humor, but with triumph. One cousin shouted that the company was never meant for someone like her, sealing a sentence she didn't know she was serving. In a single morning, they stripped her of her title, her dignity, the belief that shared blood meant shared loyalty. What she didn't know was that the decision meant to destroy her had already unlocked a destiny they would soon regret ever provoking. The day after her dismissal, the world expected a spectacle, accusations, angry calls, or a desperate attempt to reclaim her position. Instead, she vanished. Her phone went silent, her social media accounts were deactivated. She didn't respond to messages from colleagues who once depended on her solutions. Her absence became a presence of its own. The family board had prepared for a fight, not for a void. They assumed she would crumble like an emotional employee, not reposition herself like a strategist. While they mocked what they believed was her defeat, she walked the coastline at dawn, letting the waves clear her thoughts. She replayed every meeting, every ignored warning, every instance where her advice was dismissed. The humiliation had cut deep, but beneath the pain was something sharper: clarity. They hadn't fired her because she was incompetent. They fired her because she made them uncomfortable. Competence is intimidating when it appears in someone they hoped would remain dependent. In the quiet of her small rented apartment, she opened a locked file drawer containing reports she had once compiled for the board: projected debts, failed acquisitions, patent renewals that had never been completed. She had assumed incompetence. Now she suspected intentional negligence. For days, she reviewed financial statements, internal memos, market trends the family refused to address. She realized their so-called success was a tower built on borrowed bricks. Suppliers were paid late, partnerships were strained, the innovation department was a hollow shell sustained by press releases, not results. The deeper she looked, the clearer the picture became. The company was a decorated corpse. The board had been using prestige to cover decay. They ignored warning signs because acknowledging them required effort, foresight, humility, 3 things they lacked. She wasn't shocked by the mismanagement. She was stunned by the arrogance that allowed it. Her dismissal hadn't been about leadership. It had been about silencing the only person who could expose how fragile the empire really was. Her silence, however, became the first move of her strategy. She attended no meetings, made no public statements, declined invitations from mutual acquaintances who wanted gossip. Her quietness triggered something the board had never felt toward her: fear. Silence is dangerous when it comes from someone who knows where the skeletons are buried. Rumors began like whispers in a church. First, that she had met with auditors. Then, that she had hired a forensic accountant. Eventually, someone claimed to have seen her entering a law firm known for corporate takeovers. None of it was confirmed, but the absence of denial only made speculation grow. The family members who once found her insignificant now checked their phones every hour. The possibility that she was building a case, not a scene, made them uneasy. Her uncle, once smug behind his chairman title, instructed his assistants to retrieve every document she had ever handled. They discovered gaps, missing drafts, copies she had quietly archived. He called emergency board meetings not to plan company growth, but to discuss her potential intentions. Power, they realized, shifts when fear enters the room. Employees who once avoided her name now whispered it with curiosity. Some admired her composure, others feared her knowledge. Investors started asking questions the board could not comfortably answer. What started as a dismissal became a ghost that wandered the hallways of Chamberlain Company, not seen but undeniably felt. Meanwhile, she continued her walks, notebook in hand, listing timelines, connections, leverage points. Every silence became an investment. Every unanswered message became a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. She no longer sought validation, apologies, reinstatement. She sought understanding, not of them, but of the intricate weaknesses they never imagined she would uncover. The family expected tears. They expected pleading. They expected a collapse. What they never expected was a woman who understood that the most powerful noise in war isn't the scream of anger, it's the silence that prepares the knife. Her silence had only just begun. 2 weeks after her dismissal, an invitation arrived at her apartment. It was printed on embossed paper bearing the Chamberlain family seal. The occasion, the official reading of her grandfather's final will. The tone of the message was formal, devoid of sentiment, as if the man who had once told her she was the future of the business had never existed. She hesitated for a moment, wondering why she had been summoned. Curiosity prevailed. If nothing else, she expected closure, perhaps a final gesture of inheritance to the family members who believed power was their birthright. The conference room at the law firm was nothing like the boardroom she had been cast out of. Instead of marble floors and self-congratulatory portraits, the walls were lined with shelves of legal precedent, cold, factual reminders that intentions die, but signatures live forever. Her family was already seated when she entered. Her uncle sat at the head of the table, swollen with entitlement. Her mother refused to meet her gaze. Her cousins exchanged smirks, convinced she was there to watch them receive the rewards they believed she had never deserved. The lawyer, an older man with sharp eyes and a voice that never wavered, began with standard formalities. He detailed assets, trusts, philanthropic commitments with professional monotony. The family listened impatiently, waiting for the part that determined which of them would control the empire. They assumed her presence was ceremonial, perhaps included out of courtesy. None of them suspected that the ground beneath them was about to dissolve. Then the lawyer paused and reached into a locked drawer. With deliberate care, he withdrew a yellowed envelope sealed with wax bearing her grandfather's personal insignia. A hush fell over the room. The lawyer announced that this was an addendum written 14 years prior to be opened only under specific conditions: internal conflict, leadership incompetence, a measurable decline in ethical governance. The family shifted uncomfortably. Every metric mentioned suddenly felt like a spotlight pointed at them. He broke the seal. The room held its breath. The note inside wasn't long, but it was devastating. In unmistakable handwriting, the founder stated he had foreseen the family's greed, warned that entitlement would one day outgrow duty. He wrote that leadership without accountability would rot the company from within. Then came the line that detonated silence. In the event of moral decay, only one individual possesses the values required to restore Chamberlain Company to its intended purpose. He named her. Not as an heir. Not as an optional successor. As the sole authorized CEO of the corporation. Gasps punctured the air. Her mother's face drained of color. Her uncle leaned forward, as if proximity might alter the words on the page. Her cousin stopped smirking, unable to process a reality where their arrogance had consequences. The lawyer continued, confirming that the document was legally binding and immune to challenge. The founder had anticipated rebellion. He had consulted experts. The addendum was fortified like a fortress, airtight, unbreakable, irreversible. With a few sentences written over a decade ago, power shifted like a silent earthquake. The board, once confident in their control, found themselves stripped of authority. Their votes, strategies, and titles meant nothing without her signature. The same woman they had mocked, fired, and humiliated now held the fate of every department, asset, and contract. The silence in the room was different this time. It wasn't dismissive. It wasn't patronizing. It was fear. Real, sober fear. Her uncle tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Her mother finally raised her eyes, not with pride, but with dawning regret. The lawyer ended the session with a final blow. By removing her from the company, the board had triggered the very criteria that activated the clause. Their own cruelty had crowned her. She stood, calm but unyielding. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply understood. They hadn't destroyed her path. They had cleared it. The dynasty they built on exclusion now depended on the signature of the woman they tried to erase. And for the first time in years, they realized something terrifying. They could remove her from the building. They could not remove her from destiny. Her return was not announced with fanfare or triumph. There were no statements, no interviews, no dramatic speeches. She arrived the same way she had once left the building, through the front entrance, but this time, she carried the weight of legal authority rather than the burden of humiliation. The lobby, once a space where she had walked unnoticed, transformed into a stage where every footstep echoed intention. Employees paused mid-conversation, unsure whether they were witnessing a rumor, a ghost, or a reckoning. Her badge, which had been deactivated with such satisfaction, now slid across the scanner and flashed green. The sound of approval felt louder than applause. Security guards who once escorted her out now stepped aside and bowed their heads. She didn't look at them. She didn't have to. Power does not need acknowledgement. It announces itself. Behind her walked two legal representatives, both experts in corporate governance and contractual enforcement. Their presence conveyed a message more potent than threats. Every decision she made was backed by law, legacy, and preparation. She moved past employees who had once avoided eye contact. Now, they stood straighter, as if posture alone could rewrite their history with her. Whispers followed, but not the mocking kind, curiosity mixed with caution. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time, the ride to the executive floor felt short. When the doors opened, her uncle and several board members were waiting, not to welcome her, but to negotiate their survival. They approached her with hollow smiles, each one trying to rewrite the past with selective memory. They spoke of misunderstandings, temporary misalignment, and family unity. Their tone was syrup-sweet, their eyes desperate. She listened without interruption, her expression neutral, her silence more powerful than their pleas. Her mother stepped forward and attempted a tremor-filled apology. She spoke of confusion, bad advice, and emotional pressure. She even reached for her daughter's hand, but the gesture fell flat. Sentimentality had no place in this corridor. The woman who once cried in the parking lot was gone. In her place stood someone who had learned that compassion without boundaries is an invitation for exploitation. Her response was measured, delivered in a tone that neither trembled nor flared. "All communication from this point forward," she said, "must be sent to my office in writing." One sentence dismantled their emotional leverage. Her mother's face slackened. Her uncle blinked as if swallowing a stone. Her cousins exchanged looks that blended confusion with regret. She walked past them and entered what was now her office. The plaque with her uncle's name had already been removed. Her desk, once cleared in cruelty, stood restored in quiet reverence. She sat not as someone reclaiming her seat, but as someone assuming a position she had always been destined to occupy. Her assistant, hired by the board months prior, entered with trembling hands, unsure how to behave. The new CEO offered only instructions, not comfort. Clear tasks, clear expectations. No forgiveness disguised as grace. Throughout the day, she reviewed contracts, responded to urgent inquiries, and initiated actions the board never anticipated. She ordered meetings with department heads, scheduled audits, and demanded detailed reports. Every signature she placed carried authority backed by the founder's will. Every directive she issued left no room for interpretation. The family tried again through bribes, through pity, through late-night messages pleading for leniency. None received responses. She wasn't harsh. She was unavailable. Their tactics failed because she no longer needed validation, reconciliation, or approval. She had something far more valuable: clarity. By nightfall, employees no longer whispered her return. They whispered her name. Respect had not been requested. It had been earned through resilience, confirmed by destiny, and delivered in silence. Her humiliation had been loud. Her restoration was quiet. And nothing frightened her enemies more than a woman who returned not to be accepted, but to lead. Her first executive order was not a speech, a restructuring plan, or a ceremonial gesture. It was a directive, concise, silent, lethal, a comprehensive audit of every financial transaction conducted within the last decade. No one expected that. They assumed her return would revolve around reclaiming her dignity or proving her worth. Instead, she targeted the veins of the corporation, its money, its contracts, its hidden arteries of power. The audit team she brought in was not internal. They were outsiders, cold, meticulous, and loyal only to data. These were specialists the board had never dared to hire, because professionals like them don't look away. They do not negotiate blind spots, and they do not fear names engraved on executive doors. They arrived with forensic software, encrypted devices, and a mandate signed by the rightful CEO. Within hours, their presence sent waves of unease across departments that had grown accustomed to complacency. At first, the family members dismissed the audit as a formality. They whispered that it was symbolic, a theatrical move meant to satisfy investors. But their confidence withered when requests for documents arrived: contracts, external invoices, consulting agreements, procurement records, even personal reimbursements. The boardroom transformed into a pressure chamber where every missing signature and inconsistent ledger line felt like a landmine waiting to detonate. The first discovery came from a department everyone assumed harmless: marketing. A consultant listed as brand strategist had received monthly payments exceeding executive salaries. There was no portfolio, no work files, no deliverables. The consultant did not exist. The bank account receiving the funds, however, was registered under her cousin's name. The room fell silent when the auditors presented the findings. Her cousin couldn't speak. Guilt has a way of choking those who once spoke the loudest. Days passed, and the audit deepened like a surgeon cutting through diseased tissue. A second anomaly emerged: offshore accounts hidden behind shell corporations in jurisdictions known for secrecy. These accounts were funded by overbilling suppliers, a scheme orchestrated by her uncle. He had siphoned millions under the guise of expedited logistics. While she had once questioned the rising costs, the board called her concerns naive. Now, spreadsheets bore witness to their deceit. Her uncle paled as his empire of lies unraveled across projected screens. The discoveries didn't stop there. A third exposure revealed fake software upgrades charged to the company, payments routed to a firm owned by her mother's secret partner. The betrayal was complete, layered, and intertwined. Those who had accused her of lacking the mindset for leadership had built their authority not on competence, but on theft camouflaged as strategy. The company wasn't struggling because of market competition or economic downturns. It was suffocating under the weight of greed disguised as family tradition. Her grandfather's words now read like prophecy. He had anticipated that entitlement would eat the legacy he spent a lifetime building. He didn't mistrust his bloodline's intelligence. He mistrusted their character. As the audit progressed, employees watched in stunned silence. For years, they blamed themselves for stagnant wages, outdated equipment, and canceled bonuses. Now, they understood the truth. The money was there. It had been redirected into personal mansions, foreign vacations, and luxury vehicles hidden under shell companies. Their frustration morphed into something sharper: respect for the woman who dared uncover what everyone else feared. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her leadership became a scalpel cutting through excuses. Every revelation turned the company into a crime scene where financial statements were evidence and board members were suspects. Her calmness was terrifying, not because she sought revenge, but because she sought truth, and truth leaves no place to hide. By the end of the audit's first phase, it was no longer her fight to win. The company had become a corpse, and she was performing its autopsy, not to mourn it, but to expose the cause of death. The family had believed power was inherited. She proved that legacy demands accountability. The audit's findings moved faster than gossip, leaving no corner of the company untouched. Once the final report was completed, she didn't waste a second. She forwarded the documents to regulatory authorities, investor committees, and law enforcement agencies specializing in financial crimes. The moment she pressed send, years of concealed misconduct detonated into consequences no one could outrun. The first shockwave hit the family's bank accounts. Every executive with fraudulent transactions tied to their name discovered their funds frozen overnight. Credit cards declined at restaurants where they once demanded VIP treatment. Their investment portfolios, once swollen with ill-gotten gains, were seized as evidence. The same people who mocked her resourcefulness were now pleading with bankers and lawyers who could no longer help them. Entitlement had always been their shield. Now it was dead weight. The second blow dismantled the very power structure they once weaponized against her. The board of directors, those confident men and women who fired her without hesitation, was dissolved by order of the court. Titles evaporated like smoke. Corporate privileges vanished. Security badges that once unlocked entire floors turned red. Her uncle attempted a theatrical protest, shouting about family rights and legacy, but the officers escorting him out were unmoved. The building he once treated like a kingdom now rejected him like an intruder. The third wave was public exposure. As investigators began releasing fragments of the audit findings, tabloids that previously ridiculed her transformation now turned their headlines into tribute. They christened her the Iron Heiress, a title she neither sought nor rejected. Articles dissected the scandal, the offshore accounts, the fake consultants, the siphoned profits. News anchors debated how a family dynasty, once admired, had transformed into a case study in greed. The public, hungry for a narrative that blended downfall with accountability, devoured every update. The third wave was public exposure. As investigators began releasing fragments of the audit findings, tabloids that previously ridiculed her transformation now turned their headlines into tribute. They christened her the Iron Heiress, a title she neither sought nor rejected. Articles dissected the scandal, the offshore accounts, the fake consultants, the siphoned profits. News anchors debated how a family dynasty, once admired, had transformed into a case study in greed. The public, hungry for a narrative that blended downfall with accountability, devoured every update. Not everyone reacted the same way. Her cousins, shielded by arrogance for years, cracked under scrutiny. One fled the country, convinced he could outrun the extradition treaties he had never bothered to understand. Another collapsed on live television during an interview meant to salvage her reputation. Her mother retreated into silence, unable to reconcile her past decisions with the daughter whose integrity she once underestimated. Emotional collapse had replaced entitlement. What they built on deceit now demanded its price. Court hearings followed. One by one, relatives appeared before judges who treated their surnames like any other. Evidence replaced excuses. Their attorneys tried deflection, claiming misinterpretation or administrative oversight, but numbers do not lie. Contracts do not develop opinions. The law did not care about their lineage. Justice, she understood, is not a feeling. It is a structure designed to withstand tears, regrets, family ties. Throughout the turmoil, she did not celebrate. She didn't attend hearings or read headlines. She focused on stabilizing what was left of the company. While her family scrambled for sympathy, she met with investors, reviewed operational gaps, rebuilt departments they had cannibalized. Employees began to see her not as a victim, nor as a conqueror, but as a leader whose calm outlasted chaos. They realized she wasn't waging war on a dynasty. She was enforcing the standards it had abandoned. When reporters tried to corner her outside the office, she offered one sentence that became a global quote: "Accountability is not revenge. It is respect for what was betrayed." It was the closest she ever came to commentary. By the end of the quarter, the once mighty Chamberlain family had fractured into fragments, some imprisoned, some bankrupt, some forgotten. The world no longer measured their worth by their last name, but by the consequences they could not escape. Her grandfather had built an empire on principles. They had attempted to inherit the throne without inheriting the discipline. That was their undoing. She didn't destroy the family. She revealed the truth that had been rotting behind their success. The empire didn't fall because she returned. It fell because they thought legacy exempted them from accountability. With the dust of scandal settling, she stood in the executive suite not as a survivor of corporate betrayal, but as the architect of a new beginning. The company her grandfather founded had once been a symbol of resilience and innovation. Over the years, it had mutated into a monument of entitlement and stagnation. Now it was her responsibility, no, her inheritance, to restore what had been lost: purpose, respect, momentum. Revenge had served its role. Justice had done its part. The next chapter demanded something different: creation. Her first initiative startled the industry. She dismantled the recruitment policies that favored bloodlines and replaced them with a merit-based system that prioritized skill, creativity, ambition. Overnight, Chamberlain Company transformed from a gated family fortress into a beacon for engineers, analysts, researchers, visionaries who had long admired the brand from a distance. She didn't need applicants begging for opportunities. Talent sought her out. People who once overlooked her now requested appointments, eager to work under someone who valued substance over lineage. Within 6 months, she launched 3 innovation divisions focused on renewable technology, ethical supply chains, and artificial intelligence in manufacturing. The teams she assembled came from diverse backgrounds, each selected not for their connections, but for their capacity to build solutions. The company's laboratories buzzed with ideas rather than gossip. It was the atmosphere her grandfather had described many times: focused minds shaping the future instead of privileged hands guarding titles. Restoring external partnerships became her second priority. Relationships severed by arrogance and unpaid debts now reopened their doors to negotiations, not because they forgot the company's past failures, but because they respected the woman standing at its helm. She traveled across continents, shaking hands with suppliers her uncle had dismissed, investors her cousins had insulted, innovators her mother never understood. She apologized when necessary, negotiated with clarity, made commitments she intended to honor. One by one, trust was rebuilt, not as a favor, but as an asset. Investors who once ignored Chamberlain Company now competed for meetings with her. Venture capital firms requested collaborations. National economic councils invited her to speak about corporate transparency. Industry analysts who dismissed her as insignificant now quoted her strategies in interviews. She became the type of leader her grandfather hoped the family name would one day produce, not one who inherited power, but one who amplified it. Inside the company, a cultural shift unfolded without speeches. Employees witnessed promotions based on results, not last names. Performance reviews became fair, transparent, objective. Training programs appeared not as punishments for underperformers, but as growth opportunities. Departments that had once operated under fear now operated under purpose. Her calm decisiveness replaced the family's chaos. Workers who once dreaded their mornings now arrived early, inspired by the consistency of leadership. Her influence reached beyond internal operations. Business schools requested her presence at seminars, eager for her perspective on legacy, reform, corporate ethics. Professors used her audit process as a case study. Her governance model became an example cited in leadership courses. She didn't relish the attention, she understood its weight. Legacy is not measured by applause. It is measured by continuity. Yet, she remained anchored by something deeper than ambition. On her office wall hung her grandfather's original blueprint of the first Chamberlain facility. The paper, yellowed and fragile, symbolized why she worked, not to avenge the past, but to preserve a vision worth inheriting. She understood that leadership was not a reward. It was stewardship. The family who had once claimed the company as their birthright now watched her transformation from the outside, powerless to influence what they had once sabotaged. They had mistaken legacy for entitlement. She knew it was responsibility. Under her leadership, Chamberlain Company no longer resembled a dynasty defined by last names. It became an institution built on purpose, innovation, and accountability. Employees no longer whispered in hallways. They built. Her grandfather had dreamed of a future where integrity outlasted ego. She did not chase that future. She became it. Destiny never avenges with noise. It chooses silence, time, and consistency. As the new CEO consolidated her power and restored her grandfather's legacy, her story became a national subject. In every interview, she appeared calm, composed, and clear about her vision for the future. She spoke of innovation, responsibility, transparency. She never mentioned resentment or personal triumph. Yet in her serenity, the world perceived the depth of what she had endured. Her answers were never dramatic. They were lucid. She explained how an empire built on a dream could lose itself when a family forgets that inheritance is a duty, not a right. Journalists tried to make her comment on the dramatic downfall of her relatives. She never did. She simply said that everyone eventually faces the consequences of the decisions they choose to ignore. This tone, mature and unshakable, pushed the public to look beyond the scandal and understand the true meaning of her story. Meanwhile, her family lived in the shadows. They had never imagined ending up there. The same people who once posed in corporate brochures and tailored suits now spent their days avoiding attention. Newspapers printed their faces not to celebrate their success, but to expose their lies. Social media resurfaced their arrogant quotes from past years, creating a cruel contrast with their present reality. Nothing is more violent than truth when the one receiving it can no longer deny it. Her uncle, once authoritative and self-assured, now lived in a rented house on the outskirts of a town where no one knew his name. His phone stayed silent. Former partners who once rushed to dine with him now avoided him like an embarrassment. Unpaid bills covered the table where he spent his evenings regretting every decision made out of pride. The CEO's mother could not bear to watch the programs where her daughter appeared. She sometimes turned off the television, but it made no difference. The entire society was now talking about the young woman she had abandoned to protect fragile privileges. Every sentence her daughter spoke echoed as a reminder of what she had refused to see. She had believed ambition was a threat, when in reality she had had before her eyes the only person capable of saving their name. The cousins, once accustomed to invitations and travel, now received nothing but legal notices and job rejections. Their name no longer opened doors. It closed them. They tried to explain their version of events, but no one listened. People do not believe those who do not believe in themselves. Facing these human ruins, the CEO did not slow down. She gave no interview about her personal life. She made no comment about the arrests, trials, or bankruptcies. She focused on the future. Her presence alone embodied a form of justice that does not need to shout to exist. She led the company with the quiet certainty of someone who no longer has anything to prove. A journalist once asked her if she saw what was happening to her family as revenge. She replied that revenge is a deliberate action, but what was happening was simply a consequence. The choices they had made had pushed them away from the company just as they had pushed her toward her mission. They had tried to remove her from the present without realizing they were giving her the future. That day, everyone in the room understood the truth. She had never needed to destroy them. They had destroyed themselves. She had never planned revenge. She had simply followed the path her grandfather had laid before her. And it was that destiny, relentless and silent, that handled the rest.